The Chicago skyline glittered against the late afternoon haze of July 2025, its steel and glass towers casting long shadows over Michigan Avenue. The street pulsed with the rhythm of a Friday rush hour, horns blaring, pedestrians darting through crosswalks, the air thick with exhaust and the faint tang of summer heat. Nia Carter stood at the corner, her navy blazer slightly creased from a 12-hour day at the Cook County Courthouse. At 32, she was a court clerk with a reputation for precision, her sharp mind and unshakable composure earning her respect in a world where mistakes could derail justice. Her dark curls were swept into a neat bun, a silver necklace glinting at her collar, and her leather satchel hung heavy with case files she'd promised to review over the weekend. Nia glanced at her phone, the Uber app confirming her driver, Tony R., was 3 minutes away. She adjusted her scarf, a soft silk blend that matched the understated elegance of her tailored trousers, and let out a slow breath. After weeks of grueling depositions and late-night filings, she craved the quiet of her Hyde Park apartment, a glass of wine, her favorite jazz playlist, maybe a few pages of the novel she'd been neglecting. The courthouse had been a pressure cooker today, with a high-profile case clogging the docket and attorneys snapping at anyone in their path. Nia had kept it together, as always, but the weight of the day clung to her like humidity. The Uber, a silver Toyota Camry with a faint scratch on the hood, pulled up to the curb, its hazard lights flashing lazily. Nia stepped forward, offering a polite smile as she opened the back door. "Hi, I'm Nia," she said, sliding into the back seat. The car smelled of synthetic pine air freshener mixed with a stale hint of cigarette smoke, an odd combination that made her nose wrinkle. She settled her satchel beside her, the leather creaking softly against the worn upholstery. The driver, Tony Russo, a middle-aged man with a buzz cut and a faded Cubs cap tilted low, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. His eyes lingered a beat too long, his expression a mix of curiosity and something Nia couldn't quite place. Disdain, maybe, or suspicion. "You sure you're my passenger?" he asked, his voice flat but carrying a sharp edge, like a blade hidden in velvet. Nia's brow furrowed, but she kept her tone even. "Yeah, it says Tony R., right?" For Nia, going to Hyde Park, she tapped her phone, the app's map glowing softly in the dimming light. Tony grunted, shifting in his seat, his fingers drumming on the steering wheel. "Just checking. Lot of people try to hop in the wrong car round here." He pulled into traffic without another word, cutting off a taxi that honked in protest. The radio crackled with a sports talk show, the hosts arguing loudly about the Cubs' latest loss. Nia leaned back, her fingers brushing the edge of her satchel. She was used to these moments, the subtle jabs, the questions that weren't really questions but tests, probing who she was and whether she belonged. As a black woman navigating spaces where she was often the only one, she'd learned to read the subtext, to brace for the sting without flinching. The drive was quiet for a few blocks, the city's chaos unfolding outside the windows, street vendors packing up, cyclists weaving through traffic, a busker strumming a guitar near a subway entrance. Nia's mind drifted to the case files in her bag, a complex civil suit she'd been tasked with organizing. She was good at her job, indispensable even, but the courthouse was a world of hierarchies, and she'd had to fight for every inch of respect. She thought of her grandmother, a South Side seamstress who'd faced far worse indignities and still carried herself like royalty. "Don't let them rattle you," she'd always said. "You're stronger than their nonsense." Tony's voice cut through her thoughts, jarring her back to the present. "So, you work downtown, huh? What do you do?" He glanced at her in the mirror again, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if sizing her up. "I'm a court clerk," Nia replied, keeping her answer short. She didn't feel like explaining the intricacies of her role, managing dockets, coordinating with judges, ensuring the judicial process ran like clockwork. Not to a stranger, and certainly not after a day like today. Tony raised an eyebrow, his lips twitching into a half-smirk. "Court clerk, that's a fancy job for someone like you. But you're real good at filing papers, huh?" The condescension in his tone was unmistakable, each word dripping with an assumption he didn't bother to hide. Nia's jaw tightened, a familiar heat rising in her chest. She took a slow breath, her grandmother's voice echoing in her mind. "It's more than filing papers," she said evenly. "I manage case records, work with attorneys, make sure trials stay on track. It's a lot of responsibility." Tony chuckled, a low, dismissive sound that grated like sandpaper. "Yeah, sure. Sounds like you're real important down there." He shook his head slightly, as if her words were a punchline he didn't buy. The radio blared louder now, the host's voices rising in a heated debate, but the tension inside the car drowned it out. Nia's fingers curled around the strap of her satchel, her nails digging into the leather. She'd heard this script before the casual dismissal, the implication that she couldn't possibly hold a role of authority. She could let it slide, could sink into silence and count the minutes until she was home. But something in Tony's smirk, in the way he leaned back with smug certainty, made her push back. "I am important," she said, her voice steady but firm. "And I'd appreciate it if you kept this professional." Tony's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. He shrugged, his eyes flicking back to the road. "Just making conversation, lady. No need to get all sensitive." He muttered something under his breath, too low for Nia to catch. But the tone was sharp, laced with irritation. The air in the car thickened, a silent standoff between Nia's restraint and Tony's casual arrogance. They hit a red light at a busy intersection, the city's pulse thrumming around them. Tony turned slightly in his seat, his arm draped over the passenger headrest, his gaze bold now, almost challenging. "You know, I've been driving Uber for 6 years, seen all kinds of people. You don't strike me as the courthouse type. You sure you're not, like, an intern or something?" Nia's heart skipped, the words landing like a slap. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable, but inside, a storm was brewing. She'd faced this kind of scrutiny her whole life, teachers who assumed she'd fail, colleagues who questioned her credentials, strangers who saw her skin and decided her story before she could tell it. But this moment, in the cramped back seat of a stranger's car, felt different. It wasn't just personal, it was a challenge to her existence, to the years she'd spent proving herself. "I'm sure," she said, her voice low but cutting. "Can we just focus on the drive?" Her words were polite, but the steel beneath them was unmistakable. Tony scoffed, turning back to the road as the light turned green. "Whatever you say, princess." The word hung in the air, sharp and deliberate, a jab meant to provoke. Nia's chest tightened, but she refused to give him the reaction he wanted. She glanced at her phone, the Uber app's map showing their progress. They were still 20 minutes from Hyde Park, and Tony was veering west, away from the lakefront route the app recommended. "Excuse me," Nia said, leaning forward slightly. "You missed the turn for Lakeshore Drive. The app says it's the fastest route." Tony's grip on the steering wheel tightened, his knuckles palling. "I know where I'm going," he snapped, his voice rising. "This is a shortcut. You think I don't know my own city?" Nia's patience frayed, but she kept her tone calm. "Deliberate. The app disagrees. Please follow the route." Tony's laugh was harsh, grating. "Look, lady, I've been driving these streets since before you were born. You don't get to tell me how to do my job. If you don't like it, get out and walk." He gestured toward the door, the car speeding through a yellow light at 45 miles an hour. Nia froze, her breath catching. The threat was clear, a power play meant to intimidate. She glanced at the door, the city blurring past in a streak of lights and concrete. Getting out wasn't an option, and Tony knew it. Her heart pounded, but she refused to let him see her rattled. Slowly, deliberately, she opened the Uber app and tapped the report issue button, her fingers moving with the precision of someone who'd spent years mastering high-stakes situations. "I'm asking you again to follow the route and treat me with respect," she said, her voice steady as, "Granted, this doesn't have to escalate." Tony's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, his smirk returning, though it was shakier now. "Escalate? You're gonna cry to Uber about this. Good luck. They don't care about your little feelings." Nia didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her thumb hovered over her contact list, landing on Chief Clerk, Cook County. She pressed the call button, her eyes never leaving Tony's. The line rang once, twice, before a familiar voice answered. "Nia, everything okay?" It was Angela, the chief clerk, her tone instantly concerned. "Hi, Angela," Nia said, her voice calm but loud enough for Tony to hear. "I'm in an Uber, and the driver's refusing to follow the route. He's also made inappropriate comments, including racial remarks. I need to escalate this." Tony's face tightened, his hands jerking the wheel as he swerved into the next lane. "You're calling someone over this," he hissed, his voice a mix of disbelief and panic. "You're out of your damn mind." Nia ignored him, focusing on the call. "Can you patch me through to the DA's office? I want this documented properly." The weight of her words hit Tony like a freight train. His bravado crumbled, his eyes wide with sudden fear. "DA's office? What the hell are you talking about?" He turned to glare at her, the car drifting dangerously close to a delivery truck. "Eyes on the road," Nia said, her voice a blade. She wasn't just a passenger anymore, she was Nia Carter, court clerk, a woman who knew the system and how to wield it. The call connected to Assistant DA Maria Ramirez, and as Nia began to explain, the silver Camry became a battlefield. Tony's world was unraveling, and Nia was just getting started. The silver Toyota Camry wove through Chicago's west side. The city's pulse a chaotic symphony of honking horns and flickering streetlights. The summer evening had deepened into a humid twilight, the skyline a distant glow against the horizon. Inside the car, the air was thick with tension, a silent war raging between Nia Carter's unshakable composure and Tony Russo's crumbling bravado. Nia sat in the back seat, her phone pressed to her ear, her navy blazer slightly rumpled but her presence as commanding as ever. Her satchel rested beside her, a leather anchor grounding her in the storm. The Uber app's map glowed on her screen, a stark reminder of Tony's deliberate detour from the Lakeshore Drive route. Tony's earlier smirk had vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped scowl as he gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale against the worn leather. His eyes darted between the road and the rearview mirror, where Nia's calm, unyielding gaze met his. The radio crackled with a sports talk show, the host's voice a distant hum beneath the weight of the moment. Nia's call to Angela, the chief clerk at Cook County Courthouse, had shifted the dynamic, and now, as she spoke to Assistant District Attorney Maria Ramirez, the stakes were climbing faster than the speedometer. "Maria, it's Nia Carter," she said, her voice steady but deliberate, loud enough for Tony to hear every word. "I'm in an Uber, and the driver's refusing to follow the designated route. He's made racially charged comments, questioned my job as a court clerk, and threatened to kick me out of the car. I've asked him to correct his behavior, but he's escalated instead. I need this documented and handled." Tony's head snapped around, his voice rising in a mix of anger and panic. "You're calling the DA over this, lady? You're insane." The car swerved slightly, tires squealing as he veered into the next lane, drawing a sharp honk from a nearby sedan. His hands trembled, the reality of Nia's connections sinking in like a stone. Nia didn't flinch. "Focus on driving," she said, her tone clipped but calm, her eyes locking onto his in the mirror. "You're still going the wrong way." Tony's jaw clenched, his breath coming in short, angry bursts. He made a sharp turn, finally heading toward Lakeshore Drive, though his movements were jerky, betraying his rattled state. "This is bullshit," he muttered, loud enough for Nia to hear. "All this over a damn shortcut." Nia ignored him, her attention on Maria's voice, warm but authoritative. "Nia, I've got you. Can you give me the driver's name and license plate? I'll have our office coordinate with Uber's legal team immediately." Nia glanced at the driver ID on the Uber app, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "Tony Russo, license plate Illinois XJ4729. We're on the west side, heading toward Lakeshore Drive after I insisted he correct the route." Tony's face paled, his eyes widening as he registered his name and plate number being relayed. "You're giving them my plate," he hissed, his voice cracking. "This is way out of line. I didn't do anything wrong." His words were defiant, but the quiver in his tone betrayed his fear. The car lurched as he accelerated, the speedometer creeping past 50 in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. Nia's heart pounded, but her exterior remained a fortress of calm. She'd faced worse than Tony hostile attorneys, skeptical judges, defendants who thought they could intimidate her with a glare. As a court clerk, she'd learned to navigate high-stakes moments with precision. And this was no different. "Slow down," she said, her voice low but firm. "You're making this worse." Tony shot her a glare, but he eased off the gas, the car settling into a steadier pace. The city blurred past graffiti-streaked buildings, neon signs, a group of kids playing basketball under a streetlight. Nia's mind raced, cataloging every detail. Tony's words, his tone, the timestamp on her app, the exact moment she'd hit the report issue button. She knew the power of evidence, the weight of a well-documented case. This wasn't just about her, it was about every passenger who'd faced this kind of treatment and didn't have the resources to push back. Maria's voice came through again, cutting through the tension. "Got it, Nia. I'm looping in our community liaison officer to document this. Are you safe right now? Do you need immediate assistance?" "I'm okay for now," Nia replied, her eyes flicking to Tony, who was now staring straight ahead, his shoulders hunched. "But I'd appreciate it if someone could monitor this ride. I don't trust his judgment." "Done," Maria said, her tone brisk. "I'm sending a message to Uber's safety team to track your trip in real time. Stay on the line if you feel unsafe. We'll also have an officer meet you at your drop-off to take a statement." "Thank you," Nia said, her voice steady. She lowered the phone slightly, her gaze returning to Tony. "You heard that. Uber's safety team is watching, and the DA's office is involved. I suggest you get me to Hyde Park without any more issues." Tony's lips parted, but no words came. His earlier arrogance had dissolved, replaced by a mix of fury and fear. He turned up the radio, as if the blaring sports commentary could drown out the consequences closing in. The hosts were arguing about a blown call in a Cubs game, their voices a jarring contrast to the charged silence in the car. Nia leaned back, her fingers brushing the edge of her satchel. She thought of her grandmother, a woman who'd faced segregation, insults, and worse, yet never let it break her. "Don't let them dim your light," she'd told Nia as a child. "Shine so bright they can't ignore you." The Camry merged onto Lakeshore Drive, the city's skyline unfolding in a breathtaking arc of glass and steel. The lake shimmered to the east, its surface catching the last rays of sunlight. Nia's apartment was 15 minutes away, a sanctuary she'd earned through years of relentless work, first as a paralegal, then as a court clerk, climbing a ladder where every rung was a fight. She'd grown up on Chicago's South Side, in a neighborhood where dreams were hard-won and respect was never guaranteed. Her grandmother's stories of resilience had been her compass, guiding her through moments like this. Tony broke the silence, his voice lower now, almost pleading. "Look, I didn't mean anything by it, okay? I was just messing around. You don't have to ruin my life over this." His eyes flicked to the mirror, searching for a reaction, but Nia's face was a mask of calm. "You weren't messing around," she said, her tone even but unyielding. "You were testing me, seeing how far you could push. You made assumptions about me because of how I look, and when I called you out, you doubled down. That's not a joke, that's a choice. And choices have consequences." Tony's shoulders slumped, his bravado crumbling further. "You don't get it," he muttered. "I'm just a driver. I deal with all kinds of people every day. You think I meant anything by it? It's just talk." Nia's eyes narrowed, but she didn't raise her voice. "Talk like that isn't neutral. It's a signal, and I heard it loud and clear. You don't get to decide how it lands." Her words were precise, each one a deliberate step in a dance she'd performed too many times. She'd faced this kind of casual prejudice in courtrooms, in law school, in everyday encounters, a cashier's skeptical glance, a colleague's offhand comment. Each time, she'd chosen her battles, but this one felt different. Tony's words weren't just an insult, they were a challenge to her existence, to the space she'd carved out in a world that often tried to shrink her. The car sped along the lakefront, the skyline growing closer as they approached Hyde Park. Nia's phone buzzed with a text from Angela. "Officer Daniels will meet you at drop-off. Stay safe." She nodded to herself, a quiet resolve settling in. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for every person who'd been dismissed, disrespected, or dehumanized in a moment like this. As a court clerk, she knew the system's power and its flaws. She knew how to make it listen. Tony tried again, his voice softer now, almost desperate. "Come on, can't we just let this go?" I'll get you home, no problem. No need to drag this out. Nia didn't look at him. You had your chance to de-escalate, she said. You chose to push. Now I'm choosing to respond. Her fingers moved to the Uber app, where she added a detailed note to her earlier complaint. Driver made racially charged comments, refused route, threatened to abandon passenger. Escalated to DAS office at 6:47 p.m. She attached a screenshot of the route deviation, her movements methodical, practiced. She hit submit, knowing the report would land in Uber's legal inbox within hours. The car turned into Hyde Park, the familiar tree-lined streets, a stark contrast to the tension inside. Nia's apartment building loomed ahead, its brick facade a quiet promise of safety. But she wasn't done. She glanced out the window, spotting a police cruiser parked across the street. Its lights off but its presence unmistakable. Tony noticed it too, his face draining of color. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, his voice barely audible. Nia gathered her satchel, her movements deliberate, unhurried. "This is accountability," she said, stepping out of the car. She closed the door with a soft click, catching Tony's eye one last time through the window. His expression was a mix of shock and dread. A man realizing too late that he'd underestimated his opponent. "You should have just driven," Nia said, her voice calm but cutting. An officer approached, a woman in her 40s with a notepad in hand and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Ms. Carter, I'm Officer Daniels. I'm here to take your statement." Nia nodded, her composure unshaken despite the adrenaline still coursing through her. "Thank you, officer. Let's get started." As Tony's Camry peeled away, its taillights fading into the dusk, Nia stood tall, her scarf fluttering in the evening breeze. The fight was far from over, but she'd already drawn first blood, and Nia Carter, court clerk, was just getting started. The twilight sky over Hyde Park was a deep indigo, streaked with the last traces of a July sunset. Nia Carter stood outside her apartment building, the warm Chicago air cooling against her skin as the adrenaline of the Uber ride began to ebb. Her navy blazer was slightly askew, her scarf loosened from the day's chaos, but her posture remained regal, her leather satchel a steady weight at her side. The silver Camry was gone, Tony Russo having sped off the moment Officer Daniels approached, his taillights a fleeting red blur in the dusk. Nia's heart still thrummed, but her face was a mask of calm, her dark eyes sharp with purpose. Officer Daniels, a woman in her 40s with a notepad and a no-nonsense air, stood before her, pen poised. Her uniform was crisp, her expression a blend of professionalism and quiet empathy. "Ms. Carter, can you walk me through what happened?" she asked, her voice steady but inviting. A few passers-by glanced curiously, their steps slowing as they sensed the gravity of the moment. But Nia ignored them, her focus singular. Nia took a breath, her voice clear and deliberate. "I booked an Uber from Michigan Avenue to Hyde Park. The driver, Tony Russo, questioned if I was his passenger, then made derogatory comments about my job as a court clerk, implying I didn't belong in the role because of my race. He took a deliberate detour west, away from the app's route, and when I asked him to correct it, he became hostile, telling me to get out and walk. I reported the issue through the app and called my chief clerk, who connected me to Assistant DA Maria Ramirez." Daniels nodded, her pen moving swiftly across the notepad. "And you mentioned racial remarks. Can you be specific?" Nia's jaw tightened, but her tone remained even. "He said I didn't strike him as the courthouse type, and that a court clerk was a fancy job for someone like me. He called me princess in a mocking way." The subtext was clear. He was questioning my legitimacy based on my appearance. She paused, her gaze steady. "I've heard it before, but this time, it wasn't just an insult. It was a power play." Daniel's eyes flickered with understanding, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Got it. And the threat to kick you out, when did that happen?" "After I pointed out the wrong turn," Nia said. "He told me to get out and walk while we were moving at 45 miles an hour. It was meant to intimidate, to make me feel powerless." Her voice didn't waver, but her fingers tightened briefly round the strap of her satchel, a small tell of the anger she kept tightly controlled. Daniels jotted another note, then looked up. "You handled this with a lot of composure. Calling the DA's office mid-ride, that's not something most people would think to do." Nia offered a faint smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. I'm a court clerk. I spend my days managing chaos in the courthouse, attorneys arguing, judges demanding, cases teetering on a single misfiled document. I know how to stay calm and who to call when things go wrong. She paused, her gaze drifting to the street where Tony's car had vanished. But I didn't do this just for me. I did it for everyone who's been in that back seat, facing the same treatment, with no one to call. Daniels nodded, her expression softening. We'll coordinate with Uber and the DA's office to pull the driver's records and any dashcam footage. You did the right thing by reporting it immediately. She handed Nia a business card, the edges slightly worn. We'll follow up in the next few days. If anything else comes up, call me. Thank you, officer, Nia said, slipping the card into her satchel. As Daniels returned to her cruiser, Nia headed inside, the weight of the day pressing against her shoulders like a physical force. Her apartment was a sanctuary, warm hardwood floors, bookshelves lined with legal texts and Toni Morrison novels, a framed photo of her grandmother on the mantel, her smile fierce and knowing. Nia kicked off her heels, the cool floor relief against her aching feet, and poured a glass of Merlot. She sank onto the couch, the wineglass catching the soft glow of a nearby lamp, and let out a long breath. Her phone buzzed, a text from Angela. You okay? That was intense. Nia smiled faintly, typing back, I'm fine. Thanks for having my back. She opened her laptop, her inbox already filling with messages from colleagues who'd heard whispers of the incident through the courthouse grapevine. One was from Judge Thompson, a man known for his stoic demeanor. Well handled, Ms. Carter. Let me know if you need support. Nia's chest warmed at the words, a rare acknowledgement from a figure she respected deeply. She opened the Uber app, where a confirmation email from the safety team awaited. We've received your complaint and are investigating. You will hear from us within 48 hours. Another email from Maria Ramirez promised to keep her updated on any legal action. Nia leaned back, sipping her wine, her thoughts drifting to her grandmother, a South Side seamstress who'd stitched dreams into reality. She'd faced indignities Nia could only imagine: bus drivers who refused her fare, shopkeepers who followed her through aisles, employers who paid her half what she was worth. Yet she'd taught Nia that resilience wasn't just surviving, it was ensuring the next generation didn't have to endure the same. Don't let them dim your light, she'd said, her voice a melody of strength. Shine so bright they can't ignore you. Nia set the glass down and opened a new document, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she typed a detailed account of the ride. She included every word Tony had said, every shift in his tone, every moment she'd felt the sting of his prejudice. She noted the timestamp of her call to Angela, the exact route deviation, the speed of the car when Tony threatened her. As a court clerk, she knew the power of documentation, the way a single detail could tip a case. This wasn't just a complaint, it was a foundation, a record that could hold up in court if it came to that. The next morning, Nia woke to a flood of notifications. Her phone buzzed with voicemails and texts, her inbox brimming with support. Angela's voicemail was warm but firm. Nia, you're a force. Let me know what you need, we've got you. A paralegal named Kayla, a young black woman who'd always admired Nia's poise, sent a message. Heard what happened. You're incredible. Thank you. Even her cousin Marcus, ever the jokester, texted, you out here taking down Uber drivers? Sis, you're a legend. By midday, her phone rang with an unknown number. Nia answered, her tone cautious. Hello, Ms. Carter, this is Lauren Hayes from Uber's community relations team. The voice said, polished but tinged with tension. We're deeply sorry for your experience yesterday and want to discuss how we can make this right. Nia's lips pressed into a thin line. She'd expected this. Corporate damage control was as predictable as a sunrise. I'm listening, she said, her voice cool, but I'm not interested in apologies. I want to know what you're doing to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Hayes hesitated, clearly thrown by Nia's directness. We've suspended the driver pending a full investigation. We're also reviewing our training protocols to address bias and passenger safety. That's a start, Nia said, her tone unyielding. But I need more than vague promises. I want a detailed report on your findings, including the driver's complaint history and a concrete plan for systemic change. I'm a court clerk. I know how to spot empty rhetoric. Hayes promised to follow up within 48 hours. Her voice strained, and Nia hung up. Her resolve unshaken, she forwarded the call details to Maria Ramirez, ensuring the DA's office had a paper trail. Corporate apologies were often a smokescreen, but Nia knew how to cut through the haze. She'd seen it in the courthouse, defendants offering crocodile tears, attorneys spinning half-truths. The truth was in the evidence, and she was building a fortress of it. That afternoon, Nia returned to the courthouse, her head high despite the curious glances from colleagues. The incident had spread like wildfire, whispers trailing her through the marble halls. She ignored them, diving into her work, filing motions, coordinating with attorneys, keeping the judicial machine humming. But during a break, Angela pulled her aside, her expression serious. "Nia, this could be bigger than you think," Angela said, her voice low. "Maria mentioned the DA's office is looking at patterns of driver misconduct with Uber. Your case might be the spark they need to dig deeper." Nia nodded, her mind racing. "I'm ready," she said. "If this helps someone else, it's worth it." Her words were steady, but inside, a fire was growing. This wasn't just about one bad ride, it was about challenging a system that let moments like this slide. She thought of Kayla, of her grandmother, of every passenger who'd stayed silent out of fear or futility. They deserved better, and Nia was determined to deliver. As she left the courthouse that evening, the city's skyline glowed against the darkening sky, a reminder of the world beyond her fight. Nia walked to the bus stop, her scarf fluttering in the breeze, her satchel a familiar weight. She wasn't naive, she knew change was slow, often painful, and that Uber's legal team would fight tooth and nail. But she also knew the power of a single voice, a single moment, a single ripple. Her grandmother had taught her that, and Nia was ready to make waves. The Chicago summer had given way to a crisp August morning in 2025, the air carrying a hint of autumn as Nia Carter stepped out of her Hyde Park apartment. The tree-lined streets were quiet, save for the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of a CTA bus. Nia adjusted her scarf, a deep burgundy silk that complemented her tailored gray suit, and slung her leather satchel over her shoulder. Her phone buzzed with a reminder, a meeting with Assistant DA Maria Ramirez at 10 a.m. to discuss the Uber incident. The past week had been a whirlwind, and Nia, ever the meticulous court clerk, had spent it building a fortress of evidence, her resolve as unyielding as the city's skyline. Inside her apartment the night before, Nia had sat at her dining table, papers spread like a battlefield map. She'd logged every interaction, calls with Uber, emails from Maria, her statement to Officer Daniels, each entry timestamped and cross-referenced. Her grandmother's journal lay open beside her, its pages a touchstone of wisdom. One line, written in her grandmother's elegant script, had caught her eye. "Justice is a marathon, not a sprint. Pace yourself, but never stop running." Nia had traced the words, a quiet smile forming. She was running, and she wasn't slowing down. At the Cook County Courthouse, the incident had become a quiet legend. Colleagues nodded respectfully as Nia passed, their whispers trailing her through the marble halls. She'd always been respected for her precision managing dockets, catching errors in filings, ensuring trials ran smoothly, but now there was something more, a recognition of her courage. During a break, Kayla, a young black paralegal, approached her desk, her eyes bright with admiration. "Nia, what you're doing, it's huge," she said, her voice soft. "I had a driver pull some nonsense last year, but I let it go. I didn't think anyone would listen." Nia's chest tightened, her grandmother's lessons echoing. "They should listen," she said, her tone firm but kind. "And if they don't, you make them. You ever need to talk, Kayla, I'm here." Kayla nodded, a spark of resolve in her eyes, and Nia felt the weight of her role shift. This wasn't just her fight, it was a beacon for others, a signal that silence wasn't the only option. Her phone rang as she boarded the bus to the DA's office, the caller ID showing Lauren Hayes from Uber's community relations team. Nia answered, her voice cool. "Ms. Hayes, what's the update?" Hayes' tone was polished but strained, a corporate script barely masking her unease. "Ms. Carter, We've completed our initial investigation. The driver, Tony Russo, has been terminated, effective immediately. Based on your complaint and his history of passenger issues, we're also enhancing our driver training to address bias. Nia's lips pressed into a thin line. Termination was a start, but enhancing training sounded like a press release, not a solution. I appreciate the update, she said, her voice measured. But I need specifics. What's in this training? How are you ensuring accountability? And I want a full report on Russo's complaint history, every incident, every resolution. Hayes hesitated, clearly unprepared for Nia's precision. We'll compile that information and follow up soon. We're committed to making this right. I'm not interested in commitments, Nia said, her tone unyielding. I'm interested in results. I'm a court clerk. I know how systems work, and I know when they're dodging. Send me the report by end of week. She hung up before Hayes could respond, her heart steady despite the fire in her chest. She forwarded the call details to Maria, adding a note, Uber's vague on training, pushing for Russo's full complaint history. We need to see the pattern. At the DA's office, Maria greeted her in the lobby, her dark hair pulled into a neat bun, her expression a mix of warmth and focus. You're building a hell of a case, Nia, she said, leading her to a conference room with a view of the Chicago River. Uber's already squirming, and we're just getting started. The room was stark, with a long table and walls lined with legal texts. Maria spread out a folder, its pages marked with post-its. We pulled Russo's records from Uber. Turns out, you weren't the first. He's had 6 complaints over 3 years, 2 for rude behavior, 3 for route deviations, 1 for a hostile interaction. Uber issued warnings, but never suspended him until now. Nia's brow furrowed, her mind racing. 6 complaints, and they let him keep driving? That's not oversight, that's negligence. Maria nodded, her eyes sharp. Exactly. We're looking at whether this qualifies as a civil rights violation under Illinois law. If we can show Uber ignored a pattern of misconduct, we've got a case not just against Russo, but against their whole system. Nia leaned forward, her voice steady. What's the next step? We need your formal statement, Maria said, every detail on record. We're also coordinating with the Illinois Attorney General's office. They're interested in Uber's handling of discrimination complaints. Your case could be the push. They need to launch a broader investigation. Nia didn't hesitate. I'm in. Let's do this. The statement process was grueling. A 3-hour session in a windowless room where Nia recounted every moment of the ride, the comments, the detour, the threat to abandon her. Maria and a liaison officer asked pointed questions, pressing for specifics. What was Tony's tone? How fast was the car moving? When did you first feel unsafe? Nia answered with the precision of a seasoned clerk, her voice unwavering even as the questions dug into raw memories. She described the way Tony's smirk had faltered when she called Angela, the panic in his eyes when she mentioned the DA's office. Each detail was a brick in the case they were building. Afterward, Maria pulled her aside, her expression a mix of admiration and concern. You're handling this like a pro, Nia. But this could get messy. Uber's got deep pockets and a team of lawyers who play dirty. You sure you're ready for the spotlight? Nia met her gaze, her grandmother's words echoing. Don't wait for permission. I've been in the spotlight my whole life, she said, growing up on the South Side, working in a courthouse, where I'm often the only black woman in the room. It's always a stage. This one's just bigger. Maria smiled, a rare crack in her professional armor. Then let's make it count. Back at the courthouse, the incident had spread beyond whispers. During lunch, a senior attorney named Paul, usually aloof, stopped by Nia's desk. Heard about your Uber thing, he said, his tone gruff but sincere. Takes guts to call out a driver like that. Good for you. Nia nodded, surprised but grateful, and returned to her work, filing motions, reviewing dockets, keeping the judicial machine humming. But the support lingered, a quiet reminder that her fight was resonating. That evening, Nia's phone buzzed with a notification. A local news outlet, Chicago Tonight, had published a piece titled Court Clerk's Uber Complaint Sparks Discrimination Probe. The article was brief but accurate, citing an anonymous source at the DAS office and detailing Nia's escalation to Maria. Her name wasn't mentioned, but the specifics were unmistakable. Nia read it twice, her heart quickening. Publicity was a double-edged sword. It could amplify her cause, but also invite scrutiny. She braced herself, knowing the media's attention would only grow. Her cousin Marcus texted moments later, "Yo, you're famous, but watch your back, Uber's got goons." Nia laughed, replying, "No goons yet, but I'm ready." She called her grandmother, needing the anchor of her voice. "Gran, it's getting real," she said, recounting the article and Maria's update. "I'm not backing down, but it's a lot." Her grandmother's laugh was warm, unwavering. "You're doing what I always knew you would." Nia, standing tall when the world tries to push you down. Keep shining. "Baby, they can't ignore you now." Nia hung up, her resolve fortified. She opened her laptop, pulling up Uber's email from Hayes. It included a partial report on Russo's complaints, but the details were redacted, the language vague. Nia forwarded it to Maria with a note. "They're stalling. We need the full, unredacted file." She then drafted a response to Hayes, her words sharp. "This report is incomplete. I expect the full complaint history, unredacted, by tomorrow." Transparency isn't optional. As she hit send, Nia leaned back, her merlet catching the light. The city hummed outside, its rhythm a reminder of the stakes. She wasn't just fighting Tony Russo or even Uber, she was challenging a culture that let prejudice thrive in unchecked moments. She thought of Kayla, of her grandmother, of every passenger who'd faced a driver's disdain and stayed silent. This was for them, for the ripples that could grow into waves. Her phone buzzed again, a voicemail from Maria. "Nia, the AG's office wants to meet next week. Your case is gaining traction. Get some rest, you're gonna need it." Nia smiled, a quiet fire in her chest. Rest could wait. She was a court clerk, a South Side daughter, a woman who knew the system and how to bend it toward justice. The investigation was just beginning, and Nia Carter was ready to run the marathon. The late August sun cast a golden glow over downtown Chicago, its rays glinting off the glass facade of the Illinois Attorney General's office. Nia Carter stepped out of a CTA bus, her tailored charcoal suit crisp despite the morning's humidity. Her burgundy scarf was neatly tucked, her leather satchel heavy with notes, legal texts, and a printout of Uber's redacted report on Tony Russo's complaint history. The past 2 weeks had been a relentless marathon: courtroom duties, late-night research, and a growing stack of emails from Uber, the DA's office, and now the Attorney General's team. At 32, Nia was no stranger to pressure, but this fight was testing her in ways she hadn't anticipated. As a court clerk, she thrived on precision, but as a plaintiff, she was learning to wield her voice as a weapon. Nia adjusted her satchel, her dark curls pulled into a sleek bun, and took a steadying breath. Today's meeting could shape the trajectory of her case against Uber, potentially elevating it from a personal complaint to a landmark civil rights probe. She'd spent the weekend preparing, poring over Illinois Human Rights Act, studying Uber's driver policies, and drafting questions for the officials. Her grandmother's journal had been her anchor, its pages open to a line that burned in her mind. The world doesn't change unless you demand it. Be the demand. Nia was ready to be exactly that. Inside the Attorney General's office, the lobby buzzed with quiet efficiency staff in sharp suits. The hum of printers, the faint scent of coffee. Maria Ramirez met Nia at the reception desk, her dark hair in a tight ponytail, her expression a mix of warmth and steely focus. "You look ready to take on the world," Maria said, leading her to an elevator. "This meeting's a big deal, Nia. The AG's team is serious about your case." Nia nodded, her voice steady. "Good. I'm serious too." Her composure masked the storm inside, equal parts determination and nerves. She'd faced skeptical judges and combative attorneys in the courthouse, but this was different. This was a room of decision-makers who could amplify her fight or bury it in bureaucracy. The conference room on the 10th floor was sleek, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. 3 officials waited. Assistant Attorney General Sarah Kim, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a reputation for dismantling corporate defenses. Michael Torres, a civil rights investigator with a quiet intensity. And Laura Bennett, a policy advisor whose notepad was already filled with scribbles. They greeted Nia with firm handshakes and respectful nods, their expressions signaling they'd done their homework. Sarah Kim opened the meeting, her voice clear and commanding. "Ms. Carter, thank you for coming. Your case has caught our attention because it exposes systemic flaws in rideshare companies like Uber. We're exploring whether their handling of discrimination complaints violates state or federal law. We'd like your account in detail and your thoughts on next steps." Nia inclined her head, her posture poised but alert. She launched into her story with the precision of a court clerk presenting a case file. "On July 18th, I booked an Uber from Michigan Avenue to Hyde Park. The driver, Tony Russo, questioned if I was his passenger, then made racially charged comments about my role as a court clerk, implying I didn't belong in a position of authority. He took a deliberate detour west, ignoring the app's route, and when I asked him to correct it, he threatened to kick me out at 45 miles an hour. I reported the issue through the app and escalated to the DA's office via my chief clerk, Angela Harris." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. The officials listened intently, their pens moving across notepads. Nia continued, detailing Tony's tone, his smirk, the way his arrogance had faltered when she called Angela. She described the Uber app's route deviation, the timestamp of her complaint, and her statement to Officer Daniels. Her voice never wavered, each word a carefully placed stone in the foundation of her case. "This wasn't an isolated incident," she said. "Uber's own report, though redacted, shows Russo had 6 prior complaints, none addressed until my escalation." Michael Torres leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "You requested Russo's full complaint history. Did Uber comply?" Nia shook her head, pulling the redacted report from her satchel and sliding it across the table. "This is what they sent, barely half the story. I've demanded the unredacted file, but they're stalling. I suspect they're hiding a broader pattern of negligence." Sarah Kim's eyes narrowed as she scanned the document. "Smart move. We can subpoena the full records if they don't cooperate. This kind of obfuscation is typical for companies like Uber. They bury the truth in red tape." The discussion shifted to the bigger picture. Laura Bennett, the policy advisor, outlined Uber's business model, her tone analytical. "Uber classifies drivers as independent contractors, which they claim shields them from liability. But if we can prove they failed to address a pattern of discrimination, that defense crumbles. Your case, Ms. Carter, could be the linchpin." Nia's heart quickened, but her expression remained composed. "It's not just about Russo," she said, her voice firm. "It's about a culture that lets drivers operate without oversight. Passengers shouldn't have to call the DA's office to be treated with respect. Uber's system enables bias by prioritizing profit over accountability." The room fell silent, her words hanging like a challenge. Sarah Kim scribbled a note, her lips curving slightly. "Well said. We're considering a class action approach, combining your case with others to demonstrate a systemic failure. Would you be willing to serve as a named plaintiff?" Nia paused, the weight of the question settling over her. Being a named plaintiff meant stepping into the public eye, facing Uber's legal machine, and enduring scrutiny that could spill into her personal life. She thought of her grandmother, who'd faced worse segregation, harassment, systemic exclusion, yet never backed down. She thought of Kayla, the paralegal who'd shared her own story, and the countless passengers who'd stayed silent. "Yes," she said finally, her voice steady. "I'm willing." Michael Torres nodded, his expression approving. "That's a bold choice. We've identified 3 other plaintiffs with similar experiences: a Latino man denied service, an Asian woman harassed, a disabled passenger abandoned mid-ride. Your case is the strongest, given your escalation and documentation." The meeting stretched into the afternoon, covering legal strategies, timelines, and potential roadblocks. Sarah Kim outlined the discovery process, warning that Uber's lawyers would fight tooth and nail to suppress evidence. Laura Bennett discussed policy implications, noting that a win could force rideshare companies to overhaul their complaint systems. Nia listened, her mind cataloging every detail, her questions sharp and precise. "What's the timeline for subpoenas? How will you protect plaintiffs from retaliation? Can we demand data on Uber's national complaint patterns?" By the end, Nia's notepad was filled with bullet points, her resolve fortified. Sarah Kim closed the meeting with a nod. "Ms. Carter, you're not just a plaintiff, you're a partner in this. Your insight and tenacity are invaluable. We'll be in touch to schedule depositions." Nia stood, smoothing her scarf. "Thank you. I'm here for the long haul." Her voice was calm, but inside, a fire burned. She was no longer just a court clerk, she was a force, reshaping the narrative one deliberate step at a time. Maria walked her to the elevator, her expression a mix of pride and caution. "You were incredible in there, Nia. You're not just fighting for yourself, you're setting a precedent." Nia smiled faintly, her grandmother's words echoing. "Be the demand. That's the plan," she said. That evening, Nia called her grandmother, needing the comfort of her voice. She recounted the meeting. "The stakes, the weight of being a named plaintiff. It's bigger than I expected, Gran," she said, her voice softening. "But I feel ready." Her grandmother's laugh was a warm embrace through the phone. "Ready, child, you were born for this. You're making the world bend to what's right. Just like I always knew you would." Nia hung up, her heart full. She opened her laptop, pulling up the redacted Uber report. She drafted another email to Lauren Hayes, her words unrelenting. "The AG's office is involved. Send the unredacted complaint history by tomorrow, or we'll escalate further." She hit send, then leaned back, her merlet catching the light. The Chicago skyline glittered outside, a reminder of the city she was fighting for, a city where no one should face prejudice in a rideshare, a courthouse, or anywhere else. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kayla. "Heard you're taking this to the ag. You're my hero, Nia." Nia smiled, typing back, "Not a hero, just doing what's right." "You're next." The fight was growing, the ripples spreading. Nia thought of her grandmother's journal, of the marathon she was running. She wasn't alone, and she wasn't stopping. The meeting had been a turning point, and Nia Carter was ready to lead the charge. The September breeze carried a crisp edge as Nia Carter stepped out of the Cook County Courthouse. The Chicago skyline a mosaic of steel and glass under a cloud-streaked sky. Her charcoal suit was impeccable, her burgundy scarf a vibrant contrast. But her leather satchel felt heavier than usual, stuffed with case files and notes from her ongoing battle with Uber. The past month had transformed her fight from a personal stand into a public crusade, and Nia, at 32, was navigating the spotlight with the same precision she brought to her role as a court clerk. But the glare was intense, and she was learning its cost. The Attorney General's meeting had set off a chain reaction. Nia's case, now paired with 3 others in a potential class action lawsuit, had caught the media's attention. The Chicago Tribune ran a feature titled "Court Clerks Stand Against Uber Sparks Civil Rights Probe," naming Nia as the lead plaintiff. The article praised her composure and detailed the incident with Tony Russo, framing it as a symptom of systemic negligence in rideshare companies. Comments flooded the online version. Some hailed Nia as a hero. Others dismissed her as oversensitive or attention-seeking. Nia read them all, her expression unreadable, then closed her laptop. She wasn't here for applause or criticism, she was here for change. At the courthouse, the article had shifted the atmosphere. Colleagues who'd once been distant now offered nods of respect, their whispers turning to open support. During a lunch break, Judge Thompson, a stoic figure known for his sparse words, called Nia into his chambers. "You're doing important work, Ms. Carter," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "But be prepared, this will test you. The system doesn't like being challenged." Nia met his gaze, her voice steady. "I know, Your Honor. I'm ready." Her words were calm, but inside, she felt the weight of his warning. She'd faced scrutiny before growing up on the South Side, proving herself in law school, carving a place in a courthouse where she was often the only black woman in the room. But this was different. This was her name in headlines, her story dissected by strangers. The legal process was moving forward, with the Attorney General's office filing a formal complaint against Uber, alleging violations of Illinois Human Rights Act. Nia's case was now linked with those of a Latino man denied service, an Asian woman harassed, and a disabled passenger abandoned mid-ride. The plaintiffs met virtually, their stories shared in a Zoom call that left Nia both heartbroken and resolute. Each account echoed her own: a driver's sneer, a deliberate slight, a company that looked the other way. "We're not alone," Nia said during the call, her voice firm. And we're not invisible. Uber's response was swift and predictable. Their legal team issued a statement denying systemic issues. Calling Tony Russo an isolated bad actor, they offered Nia a settlement, $50, zero, and a non-disclosure agreement. Nia rejected it without hesitation, forwarding the offer to Sarah Kim, the Assistant Attorney General. "They're trying to buy silence," she wrote. "I'm not for sale." Her refusal sent a message, and Uber doubled down, hiring a high-profile law firm known for defending corporate giants. Nia wasn't intimidated. She'd seen enough courtroom battles to know how to hold her ground. Evenings found Nia in her Hyde Park apartment. Her dining table a war room of legal pads, case law printouts, and her grandmother's journal. She spent hours researching precedent, consulting with Maria Ramirez, and preparing for depositions. One night, she opened the journal to a page that read, "The world will try to drown you out. Speak louder." Nia traced the words, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just speaking, she was shouting, and the world was starting to listen. The media frenzy grew, with national outlets like CNN picking up the story. A hashtag Justice for NIA, trended on X, shared by supporters and activists. Nia stayed grounded, declining most interview requests, but agreeing to a feature with a Black-owned Chicago newspaper, The Defender. The reporter, Aisha, asked pointed questions over coffee in a South Side cafe. "Why take on a giant like Uber?" Aisha asked, her pen poised. Nia paused, her merlet untouched. "Because silence lets the system win. I'm a court clerk. I see what happens when people don't speak up. This isn't just about me. It's about every passenger who's been dismissed or disrespected." Her words were measured, but her eyes burned with purpose. The article, titled "Nia Carter, the Court Clerk Challenging Uber's Status Quo," went viral, shared across platforms with hashtags like #RIDESHARE reform. Nia's inbox overflowed with messages, support from strangers, stories from other passengers, and a few veiled threats from trolls. She filtered them ruthlessly, forwarding the threats to Officer Daniels, who increased patrols around her building. Maria warned her about potential smear campaigns, a tactic Uber's lawyers had used before. Nia braced herself, locking down her social media and documenting every odd encounter, a strange car lingering near her apartment, an anonymous call that hung up after one ring. At the courthouse, Nia's role evolved. Colleagues sought her advice, not just on filings, but on standing up to injustice. Kayla, the paralegal, started a support group for courthouse staff to share experiences of discrimination. Inspired by Nia's fight, "You showed us how to speak up," Kayla said during a meeting, her voice thick with emotion. Nia smiled, her heart swelling. "You're speaking now," she said. "That's what matters." Her family became her anchor. Her cousin Marcus stopped by one evening with takeout, his humor a welcome relief. "You're out here fighting Goliath, sis," he said, grinning over jerk chicken. "Got a slingshot ready?" Nia laughed, a rare sound these days. "Got something better, evidence." She showed him the unredacted complaint history Uber had finally sent under threat of a subpoena. It revealed not just Russo's 6 complaints, but dozens of similar incidents across Chicago. Most unresolved, Nia forwarded it to Sarah Kim. Her note concise: "This is the pattern. Let's use it." One night, as Nia reviewed deposition questions, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Drop the case or you'll regret it." Her pulse quickened, but she didn't panic. She screenshot the message, sent it to Sarah and Daniels, and blocked the number. Fear was a weapon, and she refused to let it cut her. She thought of her grandmother, who'd faced threats for daring to demand fair pay as a seamstress. "They'll try to scare you," she'd said. "Let them try." The next morning, Nia called Sarah, her voice steady. "They're scared," she said. "That means we're close." Sarah agreed, her tone optimistic. "We're pushing for a court date in early 2026. Keep doing what you're doing." "Nia, you're shaking things up." Nia hung up, her grandmother's journal open to a new page. The spotlight burns, but it also reveals. She was in the glare now, her fight a beacon for others. At the courthouse, in her apartment, in the city she called home, Nia Carter was rewriting the narrative. The spotlight was hers, and she was shining brighter than ever. The November wind whipped through Chicago's Loop, biting through Nia Carter's wool coat as she stood outside the Dirksen Federal Courthouse. The skyline loomed behind her, a fortress of glass and steel under a gray, churning sky. Her burgundy scarf fluttered, her charcoal suit sharp despite the chill, and her leather satchel hung heavy with documents meticulously prepared over months. At 32, Nia was no stranger to courtrooms, but today was different. As a court clerk, she'd spent years ensuring the judicial machine ran smoothly, filing motions, managing dockets, catching errors that could derail a case. Now she was a plaintiff, her name etched on a class action lawsuit against Uber, and the preliminary hearing was about to begin. The weight of it pressed against her, but Nia stood tall, her dark eyes fierce with purpose. Inside, the courthouse was a blend of grandeur and function, polished wood paneling, high ceilings, and the hum of modern tech. Nia took her seat beside the other plaintiffs, their faces a mix of nerves and resolve. There was Javier, a Latino man denied service, May, an Asian woman harassed, and Daniel, a disabled passenger abandoned mid-ride. Their stories, like Nia's, were threads in a tapestry of systemic neglect, and today's hearing would determine if their case could proceed to trial. Sarah Kim, the Assistant Attorney General, sat at the counsel table, her binders stacked like battlements across the aisle. Uber's legal team, 5 lawyers in tailored suits, whispered strategy, their confidence a palpable force. Judge Evelyn Harper entered, her black robes rustling, her presence commanding silence. A veteran jurist known for her fairness, she surveyed the room, her gaze lingering on Nia and the plaintiffs. This case raises critical questions about corporate accountability and civil rights, she said, her voice firm. I expect both sides to proceed with integrity. Let's begin. Sarah Kim rose for the opening statement, her tone clear and commanding. Your Honor, this lawsuit addresses Uber's systemic failure to protect passengers from discrimination. The plaintiffs, Nia Carter, Javier Morales, May Lin, and Daniel Weiss, each faced prejudice from Uber drivers. From racial slurs to deliberate abandonment, Uber knew of these issues. With over 100 unresolved discrimination complaints in Illinois alone, yet failed to act. Ms. Carter's case is a textbook example. A driver, Tony Russo, made racially charged comments, took a dangerous detour, and threatened her, all while Uber's oversight remained absent. We seek to hold Uber accountable for a culture that prioritizes profit over safety. Nia sat straight, her hands folded, her heart steady despite the weight of her name in the courtroom. She'd spent weeks preparing with Sarah, reviewing evidence, rehearsing testimony. Her grandmother's journal had been her touchstone, one line underlined, "The truth is your sword. Wield it wisely." Nia was ready to do just that. Uber's lead attorney, Richard Vaughn, a silver-haired man with a reputation for dismantling plaintiffs, rose to respond. His voice was smooth, almost soothing. Your Honor, Uber revolutionized transportation, serving millions safely. The incidents described are regrettable but isolated, the actions of rogue drivers like Tony Russo, whom Uber terminated swiftly. The plaintiffs seek to vilify a company that cannot control every interaction. We argue there's no evidence of systemic failure, only unfortunate anomalies. Nia's jaw tightened, but her face remained composed. Vaughn's words were polished, predictable, a corporate shield designed to deflect. She glanced at Sarah, whose subtle nod signaled they were ready to counter. The hearing moved to witness testimony, and Nia was called first. She walked to the stand, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her scarf a vibrant slash against the courtroom's muted tones. She swore the oath, her voice clear, then faced Sarah's questions. They walked through the incident step by step. Tony's initial question about her being his passenger, his mocking comments about her court clerk role, the deliberate detour west, the threat to kick her out at 45 miles an hour. Sarah projected screenshots of the Uber app's route deviation, each pixel a silent witness. A partial transcript of Nia's statement to Officer Daniels was read aloud, her words echoing in the quiet room. You remained remarkably calm, Sarah noted, her tone deliberate. Why? Nia met her gaze, her voice steady but resonant. I've faced this kind of treatment before. Assumptions about my place, my worth, because of my race, Losing my temper wouldn't have solved it. I focused on accountability, using the tools I have as a court clerk, documentation, escalation evidence. I called my chief clerk, then the DA's office, because I knew the system and how to make it work. The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words settling like dust after a storm. Judge Harper leaned forward slightly, her expression unreadable but attentive. Even Huber's lawyers paused, their pens still. Vaughn's cross-examination was sharper, designed to rattle. He stood, adjusting his tie, his tone insinuating. "Ms. Carter, isn't it true you exaggerated Russo's comments to bolster your case?" A phrase like someone like you could be innocuous, couldn't it? Nia didn't flinch, her eyes locking onto his. No, his tone, his smirk, his repeated questioning of my credentials weren't innocuous. They were deliberate, meant to diminish me because of my race. I reported exactly what happened accurately, not exaggeratedly, Vaughn pressed, his voice rising slightly. You escalated to a district attorney over what you call a minor disagreement about a route. Doesn't that suggest an overreaction? Nia's gaze didn't waver, her voice like steel. A driver making racially charged comments, refusing a designated route, and threatening to abandon me in a moving car isn't minor. It's discrimination, and it's dangerous. As a court clerk, I know the difference between a disagreement and a violation. I acted to protect myself and others. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, quickly silenced by Harper's gavel. Vaughn faltered, his rhythm disrupted, and moved to a weaker question about Nia's app usage. She answered with precision, leaving no opening. When she stepped down, Javier whispered, "You killed it," and Nia allowed herself a small nod, her heart pounding, but her exterior calm. The other plaintiffs testified next, their stories a haunting echo of Nia's Javier's driver refusing him because of his accent. May enduring lewd remarks, Daniel left stranded when his wheelchair couldn't fit. Huber's lawyers tried to poke holes, questioning timelines or intent, but the consistency of the accounts was undeniable. Sarah presented data, 200+ Illinois complaints, 1,200 nationwide, most unresolved. The numbers painted a damning picture, one Vaughn's team struggled to counter. By day's end, Judge Harper adjourned, promising a ruling within 2 weeks on whether the case could proceed to trial. Outside, Nia and the plaintiffs gathered, their breath visible in the cold. Sarah joined them, her expression cautiously optimistic. "You all were brilliant," she said. "Harper's tough, but she's fair. I think we've got a shot." Nia nodded, her mind already on the trial. "We're not just fighting for us," she said, her voice low but firm. "We're fighting for everyone who comes after." Javier squeezed her shoulder, May smiled, and Daniel nodded, their bond forged in shared struggle. That night, Nia cooked dinner with her cousin Marcus and grandmother, the aroma of jerked chicken filling her apartment. Her grandmother raised a glass, her eyes shining. "To my Nia," she said, her voice thick, "You're making history, baby." Nia smiled, her heart full. History wasn't made in a day, but in that courtroom. She'd wielded her truth like a sword. The fight was far from over, but Nia Carter was carving her legacy, one unyielding step at a time. The Chicago winter of 2026 was unrelenting, its icy grip tightening as Nia Carter stepped out of her Hyde Park apartment, the February air sharp against her skin. Her burgundy scarf was wrapped tightly, her charcoal coat buttoned against the wind, and her leather satchel, now a battle-worn companion, hung at her side. The Dirksen Federal Courthouse loomed in her mind, where, 2 weeks ago, Judge Evelyn Harper had ruled that the class action lawsuit against Huber would proceed to trial in April. The decision was a victory, a hard-won step in a fight that had consumed Nia's life for 7 months. At 32, Nia was no longer just a court clerk, she was a symbol, her stand against Huber a beacon for change. But the road ahead was daunting, and Nia carried the weight with the grace of her grandmother's legacy. The ruling had sent shockwaves through the media, with outlets like the New York Times and NPR covering the story. Headlines called Nia and her co-plaintiffs trailblazers, framing their fight as a reckoning for rideshare accountability. On X, #JusticeForNIA trended for days, shared by activists, passengers, and even a few celebrities. Nia stayed grounded, her focus on preparation rather than publicity. She met weekly with Sarah Kim, the Assistant Attorney General, poring over discovery documents, emails, driver logs, complaint records that painted a damning picture of Uber's negligence. One file revealed 1,200 discrimination complaints nationwide, nearly half unresolved, a statistic that fueled Nia's resolve. Uber's response was a masterclass in corporate deflection. They announced a comprehensive overhaul of their driver training, complete with a glossy passenger respect pledge, an APR campaign touting diversity initiatives. Nia wasn't fooled. She'd seen enough courthouse spin to recognize optics over substance. She pushed Sarah to demand transparency, resulting in a court order for Uber to disclose all discrimination complaints. From the past 5 years, the data was staggering, a ledger of ignored voices that Nia studied late into the night. Her grandmother's journal opened beside her. One entry stood out: "The ripples you create today will shape the currents of tomorrow." Nia traced the words, her heart steady. She was creating ripples, and they were growing. At the Cook County Courthouse, Nia's role had evolved. Colleagues who once saw her as a quiet cog in the judicial machine now sought her counsel, not just on filings, but on resilience. Kayla, the young paralegal inspired by Nia's fight, had launched a courthouse support group for staff to share experiences of discrimination. During a meeting, Kayla hugged Nia, her voice thick. "You showed us how to fight," she said. "We're not staying quiet anymore." Nia's chest warmed, her grandmother's lessons alive in Kayla's spark. "You're the fight now," Nia replied, her smile genuine. The plaintiffs Javier, May, and Daniel became a second family, their weekly Zoom calls a mix of strategy and camaraderie. They celebrated small victories, a favorable discovery ruling, a new plaintiff joining with virtual toasts and laughter that cut through the stress. Javier shared stories of his kids, May sent recipes. Daniel cracked dry jokes about his wheelchair's Uber-proof wheels. Their bond, forged in shared struggle, reminded Nia why she'd said yes to being a named plaintiff. This wasn't just her fight, it was theirs, and it was for every passenger who'd faced a driver's prejudice. Uber's legal team, sensing the tide turning, offered a new settlement, $2 million split among the plaintiffs, plus a commitment to reform their complaint process. The catch? A gag order barring public discussion. Nia read the offer in her apartment, her Merlot untouched, her mind racing. The money could fund community programs, ease her family's burdens, support her grandmother's medical bills. But the gag order was a deal-breaker. Silence was what Uber craved, what they'd always banked on. Nia drafted a reply, her words unyielding. "We reject the settlement. We're here for systemic change, not hush money." She hit send, a quiet satisfaction settling in. Her grandmother had taught her to value truth over comfort, and Nia was honoring that lesson. The pressure was mounting. Strange cars lingered near her building, their drivers watching too long. Anonymous messages back off or else pinged her phone. Each screenshot forwarded to Officer Daniels and Sarah. Daniels increased patrols, her voice firm. "We've got your back, Nia." Sarah warned of smear campaigns, noting Uber's history of digging into plaintiffs' lives. Nia locked down her social media, double-checked her locks, and kept a log of every incident. Fear was a shadow, but she refused to let it define her. Her grandmother's voice echoed, "They'll try to scare you. Let them try." Nia found solace in her community. She spoke at a South Side youth center, her words resonating with teens who saw her as proof that their voices mattered. One girl, 16 and skeptical, asked, "Why fight when the system's rigged?" Nia leaned forward, her eyes locking onto hers. "Because the system's made of people, and people can change. You don't wait for permission, you demand it." The girl nodded, a spark igniting, and Nia felt the ripples spread. Her family anchored her. Marcus, her cousin, brought takeout and jokes, calling her the Uber Slayer. Her grandmother, frail but fierce, visited one Sunday, her eyes shining as they cooked together. "You're my legacy, Nia," she said, her hand squeezing Nia's. "You're making the world bend." Nia hugged her, the weight of those words a fuel stronger than fear. As the trial loomed, Nia balanced preparation with moments of joy, running along Lake Michigan, reading Morrison, laughing with Kayla over coffee. These were her defiance, proof that Uber couldn't steal her light. One evening, Sarah called with news a fifth plaintiff had joined. A Muslim woman harassed for her hijab. "Your story's pulling others out of the shadows," Sarah said. Nia smiled, her heart full. The ripples were becoming waves. The night before a key deposition, Nia sat at her dining table, her grandmother's journal open. She wrote a new entry, her pen steady. "The fight's bigger than me, but I'm its voice. For Gran, for Kayla, for every passenger who deserves better." She closed the journal, her merlet catching the light. The Chicago skyline glittered outside, a city of struggle and strength. Nia thought of Tony Russo, a single driver whose actions had sparked a movement. She thought of the courthouse, where she'd wielded her truth like a sword. Most of all, she thought of her grandmother, whose ripples had shaped her into a woman who could shake the world. The trial was months away, but Nia was ready. She wasn't naive. Uber's lawyers would fight dirty. The system would resist. But she was a court clerk, a South Side daughter, a plaintiff who'd turned one Uber ride into a reckoning. Every step forward was a victory, every challenge a chance to shine. As she turned off the lamp, the framed photo of her grandmother smiled down, fierce and proud. "We did it, Gran," Nia whispered. "We're changing the currents." What began as a tense ride had become a movement, a testament to one woman's courage and the power of standing firm. Nia Carter's story wasn't just about justice, it was about dignity, accountability, and the unshakable belief that one voice could ripple through a city, a system, a world.